On today's episode, I'm excited to share my good friend and accountability partner, Jeanine Hauck, with you. Jeanine is a coach, entrepreneur, wife, and mom to 3 little ones, 5 and under. She's made it her goal to help women shed their old ways of thinking so they can show up every day as the most authentic version of themselves, making it possible for them to create an extraordinary life. If you are a driven woman and can relate to being a trailblazer, or you've always had the feeling you were meant for more, then I know you will relate to what she shares. I love when she talks about her own transformation from people pleaser to trailblazer. The discussion around ego was a good reminder for me to do as she suggests and ask how I can serve others rather than worrying what people are thinking. I'm so excited to share my good friend Janine's encouragement with you. Here's our conversation. Our guest today is somebody that I'm super excited about introducing you to. And at the same time, I have to admit, I'm a little bit, I'm not even sure what the word is. Like, I don't want to share her with you because she's mine. And if you don't know what I mean by that, like when you have a friend where you just click with them and you love sharing things with them and you laugh and you giggle and you do all those things, it feels special. And she's that kind of person to me. She feels special. So I'm excited to share that special person with you today. And at the same time, I'm letting go a little bit more of somebody who I think of as she's mine. So welcome to the podcast, Jeanine. I am so excited to share you. I really am excited to share you with everybody that's listening.
Oh, thank you, Dawn. You really are my person too. And I can't tell you how much that's made a difference for me personally and even in my business. Like to have that person and have that sense of community because it makes the world of difference. I was looking for that for so long. And then I met you. It was that kind of like that kismet, like kindred spirit from Anne of Green Gables kind of thing, my person.
Yeah. And Janine's a fellow Canadian. So you've heard me say that I'm a Canadian, but I love the fact that we only met a year ago and it feels like we've been, good friends for a long, long time. And it's a really different thing, I think, coming out of the pandemic to be able to, I guess, create that bit of community in a time where it's hard to do that. And so for people who are looking for that or think like, is it even available? Sometimes it comes out of the most surprising places and it totally is available. And we found that over this past year.
And the funny thing was, we were just talking about the other week, like, oh, yeah, we haven't even met in person before. We talk almost every day. We have not met in person. So it's incredible where that community can come from.
Yeah, it's pretty special. I'd love if you'd share a little bit about who you are, what you do with the audience so that they can get a feel of who you are.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, as Dawn said, my name is Jeanine Hauck. I am an entrepreneur. I'm a mom. I have 3 little ones ranging from 5 years old all the way to 1 year old. So, I have a busy household. And what I do is I really help women who are meant for more and meant for bigger things and meant to get out of that box of what they've been told is true and what society has said is true. And really, those women who are truly going to become those trailblazers or already identify as those trailblazers. Because we're in this era, in this age right now, where we truly can step into that and step into that personality and that persona. And it's just that first step of choosing that is the hardest and is generally the longest step to get into. And that's where I get to really help and guide women.
And that's exactly why I wanted you on the podcast. I mean, we focus on women who are feeling like they identify either as a people pleaser or somebody who's a perfectionist or a procrastinator or 2 or 3 of those things. And I think often taking that first step, we can be coming from one of those places, and that's what's really hampering us and holding us back from stepping forward, the overwhelm or feeling we have to do it perfectly or, what will others think of me, all of that. And I would love to hear a little bit about your own journey, where you found yourself in those 3 Ps at different times, I guess, and stages. But can you identify with some of that with us?
Well, as you know, I'm a bit of an overachiever. So at one point or another, or all at once, I've related to all of those, the procrastination, the perfectionism, the people pleasing. I've been and done it all. And in some areas of my life, I'm still maybe doing that. But the nice thing is I get to look at that and adjust. It's no longer a box that I'm putting myself in. It's just a way of growing out of it. I have three different stories on where I've overcome these things a little bit. And I remember I was taking a class. It was like how to communicate with your spirit guides or something like that type of a class. And I remember paying $400 for the weekend. And a lot of these times I would worry about going to classes and feeling like I was dumb and I didn't know it. And like, do I even know enough to come to the class? Which the class's specific point was to teach you and to get you to that point. But I didn't even feel like I was worthy to be there at that point. So, more often than not, when I would take classes, I'd in the back and I wouldn't ask questions, even if I didn't understand or anything like that. And then it just hit me once like a light bulb moment, like, okay, it helped for me. It helped having that money element. I'm like, you know what? I'm paying for this. I get to choose what I get out of this experience. And so for that one weekend course, I decided I'm not going to care what people think of me. And I am going to ask every question. Doesn't matter how stupid I feel when I ask it or what other people think about me or anything like that. And it was incredible. That was a game changer with how I show up to everything now. And I got more out of that class than like any other class that I've ever taken. And it helped not only me, but the people around were like, oh my gosh, it's like it started opening them up too, so that they could ask the question and like they didn't feel like dumb. And we got so much more out of that class than we've ever done before. And I don't know, I just found it incredible. That was one of those, it was a very small thing, but it was one of those pivotal moments when I stopped caring about like, what will everybody else think? And like, what if I don't get it right? What if I don't look good enough? And like, it was a very empowering moment for me.
That's awesome. I'm just thinking as you're saying that, how many times we'll be somewhere learning something and we think to ourselves that we have to actually already know everything, so therefore we shouldn't ask any questions because we don't wanna look like we don't know. I mean, well, that's what we're there for, right? And how weird is
Mhm.
that, that we can't just allow ourselves to be a beginner, to be learning, from the beginning. It's okay.
Well, yeah, and it is okay. Like I even remember in school when I had a question for the class, like the teacher, I would like wait till she was at her desk and I'd go over and I'd whisper it to her because I didn't want the whole class to hear that I didn't know something. And like you're specifically at school for that. So that was a huge piece to let go because I was blocking off so much learning and like so much opportunity for growth by worried about what other people would think of me and like how I would look when I did show up.
And how many times do you ask something and then other people are like, "Oh, yeah, I was wondering that too. Oh, me too." Right? And somebody just needed to actually say it or ask it.
I actually pride myself on being that person now, being the person who's like okay with asking whatever because I realized it echoes in the whole class. It echoes in whatever room you're in because usually I find like that group of people, no matter how random they were to be in that classroom, they all have something in common. There's a reason that you guys were all pulled together. So there's a very good chance that what you're asking will resonate with everyone. So by being brave enough to ask that question, you can make a difference in other people's lives, even if it was a silly question. It might not be silly to somebody else.
I think that's part of that community that we were talking about too, is when you're willing to
Mhm.
step out and say something that maybe others aren't, it allows them to then let down their guard and be able to be authentic and be themselves and realize it's okay, like, I'm not being judged here. And, sometimes we have to be that person to lead the way.
It's not always easy to be that trailblazer, but I know like your community is full of ambitious women. So they know that feeling. Like it's more than just it's very easy to just put up your hand and ask a question, but it's all the feelings and the reasons that you have behind it that makes it a lot harder. So it's not unjust in feeling that way, but it's such a release when you let that go.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna ask you too, When you think about, whether it's people pleasing or it's procrastination or it's perfectionism, have there been different stages in your life where you've known, like, I am more this way? Like, if when you look back now, would you say I was more this way most of my life, or were you just different things at different times?
A little bit of both. I will say, but I always found perfectionism for me was my form of procrastination.
Mhm.
So I put things out because I'm like, well, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't right. And for me, that was my way of procrastinating and not getting myself out there and not getting myself seen. So those two for me are very much one and the same. And so when I started making a change in the last year, and that's when I've seen like huge growth in my business, my life, everything. But it's all about taking those bold, messy steps. So even if it's not quite ready, still putting yourself out there and tweaking, because just like anything, you don't know what you don't know. And on the field training is so much more valuable. You'll learn so much more if you just put it out there. As long as you're okay with not caring what other people think and realizing that this is just a stage of your growth. I think a lot about having little ones and stuff. I think of the toddler stage when they're working on walking and stuff and they like fall down and one day they start walking. But I wouldn't ever judge my kids for falling down the first few times. So you need to, and they wouldn't get to the walking stage without falling down a few times. So it's okay to go out there and just like throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what needs changed, adjusted, anything. And sometimes things just need practice. You need to do those couple times before you create something beautiful or you create something that's like really authentically you.
Your illustration is so good. Like, we would never say to our kid, "Oh, you know what? You've fallen like 6 times now and you're not walking, and it's been like 3 days of trying. You need to just stay in a chair. Like, I
Yeah.
think you're not gonna walk for the rest of your life."
And sit there and visualize and sit there and think and sit there and plan, but don't take action. I don't want you to take action until you can 100% like walk, do marathons, things like that. Like, don't even try. And that's what we're doing. As adults, that's what we're doing. We're sitting in the planning and we're sitting in the visualizing. And if I just have enough stuff ready and prepared and good, then I'll be able to do it. But in reality, you gotta take those couple tumbles.
Yeah, and it's funny too because I mean, this analogy can go really far, but even the idea that little kids watch us walk, right? And they
Mhm.
obviously see, I wanna be doing that. Like, I wanna get over there. I wanna, follow mom, and mom's walking. And so they're trying to mimic and do what we're doing. But at the same time, babies aren't comparing. Like, they aren't like, "Oh, I can't do what you can do, and, so I'm horrible," right? Like, that isn't a part of their process. And
Mhm.
yet we're so quick to be looking at somebody else who has been walking, for 20 years and say to ourselves, "Well, I couldn't do it this week, so therefore I'm no good at this."
Yeah, and I'll never get there because I can't do that right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a bit of a sadness to that because it cuts us off from a lot of our potential because it's like, man, you could like going with the walking thing, you could be a marathon runner, but you weren't willing to fall and scrape your knee the first couple times. And falling and scraping your knees, you made it mean something about you. When it doesn't mean you're a failure, it doesn't mean anything like that. All it means is you get to go up and try again. And maybe you getting up and trying again is the inspiration that other people are looking at. Because I know, like, one of the ladies that I like to follow, she had done this huge launch and she was like planning it. And she's like, today's the day. And then she's like, I'm sorry. I'm like, she had hundreds of people sign up. And she's like, I'm sorry, I have to cancel this. She's like, it's not aligned with me. It doesn't work with like what's happening in my life right now. And like for me, it felt like that gave me permission to no matter what's out there, that I gotta still factor in like what works for me. And
Yes.
it's a little off to the side, but it just shows that like even if what you might consider a failure, that might be what somebody sees as like the inspiration or the permission that they need in their life.
That's a really good point. I think often that's what I know, I've been afraid of. And even now, perfectionism is definitely the one of the three that I still have to pay the most attention to. But I often feel like if I don't do this right, then are other people going to think that I don't know what I'm doing? Or am I going to let them down? Or are they going to feel disappointed or that I'm not really what they thought I was? But I'm learning that people are actually looking to me for guidance, not perfection. And
Mhm.
so, right, when you can let go of that feeling of, I have to do it all right. So any eyes looking at me, I better make sure it's, really perfect. And to be able to say, like, I can't do this, or I'm still struggling with this, or, this is what happened to me. It does. It allows you to kind of, as the person that feels responsible, to give a sigh of relief that you don't have to carry that burden. And for people watching you to be like, oh, it's okay to be like that. And here's how you handle it if that happens too.
Yeah, and in reality, people are looking at you when they've fallen or like when they're in a lower place in their life and they're looking for guidance. And if you've always been perfect, you're not always someone that I could relate to because I need someone who scraped their knee and like still chose to move forward. And that would make your story resonate with me so much more. And I would know and trust that you had the skills and guidance that I needed to get where I needed to go.
I think all of this is really important no matter what stage of life you're in. And it's something that's really valuable. Like you said, you have really young kids. I have kids in their teens and, tween. And I think that's part of, mothering and parenting too, is being able to say to your kids, like, I'm not perfect. I failed at this, or I'm sorry. Right. Those kind of things that just allow them to understand. And in the same way that, you know, modeling that for our kids, we can model that for other women around us. Like, it's not just our family that we can model for.
Yeah. And I find motherhood gives us an amazing opportunity to relearn things and re-look at things through another eye or like things that ideas that we've had cemented for so long. It really allows us to go back and look at it and see, like, do I still believe this? Does this still apply to me? Is that what I want to pass on to my kids? And I think that's a practice, whether you're a parent, whether you're not, that's something we should really be doing regularly in all areas of our lives. Like, does this still serve me? Is this thought still mine? Is going to get me where I want to go?
You know what? I'm just thinking, since we've been together in this past year, I mean, we were both in a coaching program together, learning together, things that were new, that were hard, like what we're talking about, things where we chose to do it messy and do it anyway. And part of that, right, was being in that community of women and modeling, what was working for ourselves and for each other, and taking what worked and taking, throwing away the things that didn't. But I'm just thinking, when we talked about community at the beginning, we're talking about, letting go of that perfectionism, about how it's tied in with procrastinating and all of that. What would you say over this past year, as we've had to do hard things together and we've been learning together some new things to create bigger and better businesses for women and to serve those communities that we love? What would you say is something that you learned and thought, this is something new that I'm going to use going forward?
Yes, good question. I don't know if this is per se new, but it did make a huge impact. Like it was new in practice more so.
Mhm.
But the phrase of "it's not about you," I found that released me from a lot of things. It released me from, like, the people pleasing, it released me from, like, needing to show up perfect, all of that, because as a coach, when you're beginning, you're like, "Oh, like, I wanna get this all right. What are they gonna think about me? I wanna show up a certain way. As a coach, I need to be at this level, or I need to show up this way." And, like, that phrase of "it's not about you," it puts you so much more in a space of service. So it's how can I help them? What do they need? What do they desire? What do and you're no longer in the picture. Now you're just like a conduit to being in that place of service. And with being in that place of service, you can create such a bigger impact on everybody. And like the people you help, they'll now be able to go and create such a big impact on the people in their lives. And it's so much more fulfilling that way. So it's one of those frou-frou answers. But I honestly believe in all areas of your life, if you think like it's not about you, well, then you don't really worry, what do people think of me? Because is this about me? It makes me think I'm going to a wedding this weekend. And I like a couple of years ago, if I went to a wedding, I'd be like, oh, what am I going to wear? Does this match? Is this to the right theme of the wedding? What if I dress up too much or too much down? What are people going to think when they see you? And it's that aspect of it's not about you. It's not your day, not your anything. You get to show up and support the bride and groom.
That's awesome. I think that's funny when we get so in our own heads, right? I was just reading again, and I've read this many times, but just the other day, I think it's some email that was sent to me about the fact that we worry about this, and then the reality is every other person is worrying about themselves too. So nobody's really paying any attention to the things that you think are so important, right? And I think that's the thing. Like we do have such ego in all reality. As much as we try not to, we really do have such ego in what we think is so important and that people are going to even notice or care about us when in
Mhm.
reality they're in their own heads too.
Oh my gosh. I see that as a reminder every once in a while. I'm like, oh yeah, isn't that true? But it's so liberating when you can start taking out the ego out of things and you can get so much clearer on your purpose and like how you can serve in your life, and everything gets easier and it just slows down. Life slows down when you can take that ego out because you're not overthinking everything.
Exactly. I think that's part of like, I'm always talking about less stress. How can we do this with less stress? How can we have more ease, more joy, all of that part of it? And I think you've hit that really well. When we aren't in our own heads, it totally lets things slow down, lets us
Yeah.
make clear choices and see things just from a really grounded space.
I don't know if this resonates with anyone, but I know you and I had talked about it quite a long time ago. But I'm like a recovery overthinker. I used to overthink about everything. If I knew I was going to have a conversation with someone, I would literally think of the conversation we were going to have. Okay, if they said this, I would say this. If they said this, like it would be something that was taking up my mind for hours before the actual conversation even happened. And at the end of the day, a lot of the times the conversation was like, this, oh, done. It was like a 2-minute conversation that now it was actually 2 hours and 2 minutes because of how much overthinking I was doing way, way before that. So releasing that ego and that like need to be perfect and like know all the answers, oh, liberating. And like you said, like it's like when you feel liberated, it's like taking that deep breath. And when you take that deep breath, everything just slows down.
Yeah, I'm all for that. Anything that can make life feel like you're in the moment and actually enjoying where you're at rather than either worrying about what's about to come or, feeling regret or guilty over something that happened. If we can just stay, in this place, I'm all for it.
Yeah, because so often we're like, you know, once I hit this goal, I'll feel satisfied. And then once you hit your goal, I'm like, okay, but not good enough. You've moved the marker ahead and okay, next goal, next goal. And then you never get to enjoy anything from one goal post to the next. And once you get to that goal, you never really celebrate that either. So where's your enjoyment? And where's the love of life in there?
I have to say, like to everybody that's listening, this is the part of our friendship that to me has been the most valuable over this past year. We talk, if not every day, pretty much every other day. Like it's strange for us to miss 2 days in a row, but to be able to like say, "Hey, this happened today," and have you say back, "That's great," right? Or to you to say, "Hey, I'm doing this," and me to say back, "That's awesome. So how's it going?" That little bit of celebration in the day has totally changed how life feels to me. So I don't know if you know that it's that big of a deal for me, but it changes because every day there's joy in it, right? Every day there's something to celebrate. And I remember my coach saying to me, "You never celebrate. You never celebrate. You just move on to your next goal and you move on to your next goal." And so having that person, which is you, to be able to just have that quick, 5-second celebration in the day has really, really changed that. And it's part of what you're talking about that deep breath, about taking
Mhm.
that time and relaxing and enjoying where you are in your life.
I feel like you were someone I manifested into my life because it was like 6 months to a year before. I'm like, I want someone that I can totally like nerd out about business stuff, self growth stuff. Like, that's my like nerdy space or one of my many nerdy spaces. And like, I also like, I didn't feel like I had someone I could just tell to because they'd be just like, oh, yeah, that's nice. And they wouldn't truly get it. So then when I found my people, when I found you, it was a game changer because I'm like, oh, I could totally nerd out and like let her see all my nerdiness. And like she would be right there at that level. I'm sorry. I called you out as a nerd too. They had to know.
Yeah, I admit it. It definitely is a space that we enjoy. And tell us a little bit, because I know in your nerdy space and building your business and serving the women that you love to be around and you love to feed into, tell us a little bit about the freebie that you're giving. And I'm going to put this in the show notes, so take a look there. But it's called the True Self Avatar. And I think this fits in perfectly here is this person, right, that we're talking about.
This was something that was so fun for me to put together because so many times when we're planning ahead in our life and like, who do we want to become and everything like that, it can feel so heavy and like overwhelming and like where to begin. So this is a really fun, it's a worksheet that kind of breaks it down into some questions on getting to really to the heart of who you're meant to be. So that's not who you are now. Um, Generally, it's not who you are now. Like a lot of times who we are now is conditioned by so many other people's opinions and the environment and everything like that. So that is peeling back those layers so we can see who you really are. And we really get into a fun practice of building who your true self avatar is. And so you get to go in, what would you look like? What would you wear? What would your hair look like? What would you be doing? What would you believe in? And so then you can really bring it into the physical and you can really start wearing that persona and wearing who you're becoming. Because then any decision you get to make from today and this point on, you get to be like, no, not who I am now, who I'm going to be or who I am becoming. What would I decide if I was from that point of view? And so you get to make a beautiful vision board of who you're going to become so that you have that and you can look back on and it's like, wait a second, I'm making a choice right now from a place of where I was or a place of lack. Let's go into like the abundance and the greatness of my life, what it's going to be and what it is right now. And it's a great anchoring point so that you don't forget your potential and what you're becoming in the busyness and the hustle of the day to day.
I love that you've created this, for what it is and also for calling in, like you were saying, like you felt like you manifested me, but for calling in the people in your life that are going to be at that same space, that same level, that same place with you. If you don't really know, right, who you want to be, then how are you going to get there, first of all? And how are you going to have those people around you that are going to resonate with you and that you're going to feel supported by and are gonna have that, that fun, like with us, that nerdiness about business that we enjoy. But whatever it is that is the thing that lights you up, that's the way you're gonna find those people too, is to really know who you are.
Yeah, because that's one thing I've really appreciated about my past self is I've like the coaching programs I've taken, that's always with people who I feel are above where I am or ahead of where I am. And like it creates a stretch because I know I'm going to be there. So they hold you accountable to get to that level so much faster, being in that room of people that you admire and you're ready to become. So if you can have a visual proof of who that is you want to become and get really clear on it, it makes it so much easier and so much faster getting to where you're going.
Thanks so much, Janine, for being on the podcast. I love that we got to chat. I love that we got to share a bit of our nerdiness and our connection with everybody. And I love that I've been able to connect people with you because, again, like I said, I feel like you're that special person in my world. And I want to share you and let other people experience what you are too.
Oh, thank you, Dawn. This was such an honor to be on this podcast. And I know you're going to be just hitting these women who are meant to do so much. And I'm excited to see as they come into your world what they begin to create.